And when I talk about STAR in your next interview, I am specifically playing on the STAR interview technique or model that you can use when it is that you are responding to your interview question. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode on It's Learning Life for Real. I'm Tamika, and here on It's Learning Life for Real, I use my experiences as a learning and organizational development professional to share insights and tips that you can use as you journey towards your personal growth and professional development. Before we get started, if you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're coming back, welcome again. I'm so happy you decided to join me. And I just want to say a huge shout out to the 85 subscribers. Yes, I got to 85 subscribers, and I appreciate every single one of you who have taken the time to watch, to share, to like, to comment. I truly appreciate you. You encourage me, and I encourage you to continue to leave me comments and or suggest topics that you'd love to hear me share about in upcoming videos. So huge shout out to each and every one of you who take the time on a weekly basis to like and subscribe to my videos. I really appreciate you. So thank you again. I recently sat as a part of interview panels, 2 interview panels in fact, where I had an opportunity along with 2 other panelists on the interview panel to walk with our interviewees through a list of questions. On average, the interviews lasted for an hour, and we probably had around 8 questions that they had to walk through. And I know that whenever there are opportunities to interview, a lot of people are nervous. Sometimes people don't necessarily know how to best share their experiences. And I have seen instances where people who are very experienced based on they've written down on paper and on their resume, come to interviews and they show up in a way that does not reflect their expertise, does not reflect their experience and or the capacity to do their jobs. So my reason and the motivation behind sharing this particular video, apart from the fact that I've already written an article about it, but my motivation is really to help persons develop greater degree of comfort in terms of how they can make sure you are preparing yourself to do your best on your interview. And not just to do your best, to stand out, to stand apart, and to start that interview so that you will land the job. So how can you prepare yourself to ensure that you're given the most effective, succinct, concise, and impactful answers to the questions that are going to be used to ultimately determine whether you get the job or don't? So when it comes on to interviews, there are really 2 main types of questions that an organization will ask you. The 2 types of questions are behavioral interview questions and traditional interview questions. Behavioral interview questions are based on the premise that your past behaviors, past performance is and will be a great indicator of what you're likely to do in the future. So increasingly, we're seeing organizations shifting towards the use of behavioral interview questions because as a strategy and a tool to assess whether or not a candidate is going to be a best fit and or to see some of the things that you've done in your past, with the hope that if you've done these great things, you're going to be able to come to their organization and make an impact. Behavioral interview questions might start with or include phrases such as about a time when, give me an example of, or describe a time when you had to use your. So these are some of the phrases that usually come when it is that you are being asked behavioral questions. On the other hand, you have the traditional interview questions, and these traditional questions use specific questions to get to straightforward answers. So an example of a traditional interview question could be, tell me about yourself. Why did you leave your last job? What makes you the best candidate for this opportunity or this role? How do you deal with, for example, conflict? So those are what the traditional questions might sound like. Other traditional questions could be, what do you consider to be your greatest strengths and weaknesses? Those would be examples of traditional interview questions. So the STAR method provides interviewees with an effective format that they can use to ensure that their answers to those interview questions are clear, concise, and effectively communicate and demonstrate what their skills, background, and expertise is. So that's the benefit of the STAR method. So let's dive deeper into the STAR interview method. STAR is an acronym for S, situation, T, task, 3, action, and 4, results. So basically, as you think through each question that the interviewer or interview panel asks you, you are going to use this method to make sure that your answer to the question effectively communicates the situation that you were in, the task that you had to do, and or your role in that process, the actions you took, and the result of your actions. And fun fact about the STAR interview method: when it is that you're using the method, what you're doing is you're drawing on your experiences and your exposures to come up with examples or stories of a time when you might have applied that skill or what you would have done in your past to demonstrate your experiences. So you'll hear me talk about stories and examples, meaning when you're responding to these behavioral type questions, you are going to be required to share scenarios, examples, or stories of a time when you would have demonstrated that particular skill or how you performed in the past around any of the areas that you're being asked questions about. So with S, or the situation, this is where you have an opportunity to tell the interview panel or the interviewer what was the specific situation that you were in. You want to help the interviewer understand the what, the why, the when, the who of that particular situation or example you're about to share. The T in the STAR interview method is where you basically outline and explain in your response or answer to the panel what you were tasked with doing. That is, what was your role and what was your responsibility in that particular example or scenario or story that you're sharing about. So you want to be clear to explain what your role was as a part of the project, as a part of that team, or in that particular example being shared. So action, in this step, here's where you're sharing with the panel what actions or steps you took to complete the assignment, complete the project, or to get to the performance goal. So that's basically what you're sharing in action. You're sharing what you did, not anybody else's, what you did. And results, here's where you are going to be sharing with the interview panel as a result of the situation that you were faced with, your task or role in the process, the actions you took. You are now going to share with them what was the result of your actions. And the thing about it is, as you think about the examples that you are going to be sharing, or the stories or the scenarios, you have to, I mean, it's a no-brainer, but I'm going to say it anyway. You want to ensure that whatever examples you are going to share in the interview process is going to be an example that makes you look good. So no, you're not going into interview to show situations where you probably were not the best version of yourself. If you're coming up with an example, you want to make sure as best as possible it's an example that is impactful, effective, and is going to make you look good. So in the result, you're basically sharing how your actions led to a particular outcome. And the outcome could be that you completed the project ahead of time. The outcome could be that you were able to meet the goal, meet the deliverable, solve the problem, make the decision. Whatever the outcome was, you are going to have to be able to articulate to the interview panel how the actions you took led to the particular desired outcome. But the thing I want to say about this particular one is that there's a degree of grace that attends it, because it could be that you were responsible for the completion of a project and the project was not completed because something happened. Say for instance, COVID, the pandemic, and that disrupted the process or the progress that you were making. You want to be able to communicate to the interview panel that the project was not completed. But if it is that you are going to be able to say that unfortunately something came up and the project wasn't completed, either because the company changed policy or they decided they didn't have any more money to fund it, and or the COVID pandemic came and you weren't able to finish, whatever it is, In results, the key is not only to share your successes. It could be that your attempt failed, but if your attempt failed, the key thing to do here is to communicate to them what you learned, because there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. There's nothing wrong with sharing that you had a failure. The key is to be able to communicate that in this particular instance, things didn't go on as planned. We were delayed, the project ran over budget. However, this is what I learned, and this is how I applied it to my next project or my next experience. If it is that you're able to demonstrate learning and or how it is that you took away lessons learned from that experience and applied it to make yourself better and or to use it for positive, then the interviewers are not going to hold that against you. In fact, that is a character trait that they might be looking for in their employees. So in sharing your results, the key is not to hide or act as if you've never made a mistake or failure, because if it is that those have been a part of your experiences, you want to be able to share those, but you're sharing them from a perspective of lessons learned. How did you move forward, and or how did you recover? So the key thing to remember in sharing your examples or your story or that particular scenario in response to the interview's question about tell me about a time when, or describe how you did this or that or the other. The key thing you want to remember is that you are the star of the story. I have seen in many instances where interviewees come into the interview and they talk about the work within the context of we and we and we and so on and so forth. And whereas, yes, that may indicate that you're a team player and you work well in a team, at the end of the day, as interviewers, we're not trying to assess your teamwork skills generally. If we ask specific questions about teamwork, clearly the example should indicate that you're able to work in a team and how you did that. But for the most part, you are the star of the interview. The emphasis of the interview responses should be focused on what you did, not what anybody else did, because in any instance, what it will say to us is that perhaps you aren't a leader, perhaps you aren't able to take initiative and work on your own, and or that you perhaps rely on others or need others to be able to execute and do the job well. So remember that I statements, you should use a lot of I statements, not we statements. Behavioral interviewing is not intended to show off how well you work as a part of a team. It's intended to demonstrate what your skills are, what you have done in the past, how you are able to impact and make a difference. We're assessing you. So I, but not we statements. That's one of the things that you need to remember. So at this point, you might be thinking, that sounds all well and good, Tamika, but how do I develop these stories, these examples? Because I don't know what the interviewer is going to ask me when I go to the interview. So how do I prepare these stories? How do I ensure that I'm ready to give responses that demonstrate my capabilities, my competencies, my expertise, background, and how I've done in the past? How do I do that? So I'm going to share with you some tips and strategies that you can use to do that. So here goes. So there are 3 main tips and strategies that you will want to use as you prepare for that next interview. The first thing you want to do is you want to review the job post. You want to spend some time combing through that job announcement and making sure that you circle the themes, the common themes or threads that you see throughout the job advert or the posting and so on and so forth. Once you've been able to do that, to identify what the key skills are that they're looking for, then you want to take an opportunity and to do the second tip, which is to identify the key skills that are in the job announcement. So remember, the first tip is that you want to carefully review the job announcement. The second thing you want to do is to identify the key skills and or preferred capabilities or competencies that the employer is looking for or the organization is looking for in the ideal candidate. And the third thing you want to do is you want to prepare your stories that shows examples of you using those skills in previous roles and or in the past. Basically, you want to do that. So 1, you want to review the job post. 2, you want to ensure that you're identifying the key skills and capabilities. And 3, you want to be reflecting, taking some time to think about your 10, 20, 15, or even 5 years experience to see what were some examples or times or instances or scenarios that you were able to use those skills. And here's the thing about creating your stories. Whereas you can get creative, you don't want to make up things that aren't true. You don't want to embellish them too much, and you don't want to exaggerate them to create the impression that you have skills that you don't.